Welcome back. In The Sum of Us, Heather McGhee examines so-called voting reforms that have resulted in the disenfranchisement of black voters and even white voters.
Mark Namick examines McGhee's connection to voter advocacy here in Ohio and recent efforts to fight voter suppression.
The nonprofit Heather McGhee once headed led the fight against Ohio's efforts to invalidate the registration of voters who did not cast ballots regularly. The purge, done under Ohio's then Secretary of State Jon Husted and those before him, affected tens of thousands of voters, many in Ohio's urban counties. Husted, now the state's lieutenant governor, claimed removing dead people and inactive voters improved the integrity and efficiency of elections. McGhee's nonprofit and other groups sued, arguing low-income voters and voters of color were most affected. But central to the case was Larry Harmon, a white Navy veteran from Portage County whose registration was canceled because he had not voted in 6 years.
When I went to vote, I went into the hall and I looked up my name. And I looked and I looked, but I didn't see my name.
At issue was the state's method of notifying inactive voters of the purge. It required them to respond to a postcard, start voting again, or be dropped.
I didn't think I was required to vote at every election.
The case made it to the U.S. Supreme Court, which ruled Ohio's purge process, when applied uniformly, did not violate the Voting Rights Act. Activists said the case nonetheless drew much-needed attention.
The supplemental process, also known as the voter purge, is still a very real and present danger.
In the last big election, Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose released the names on the purge list, allowing voter groups to scrutinize it.
There in 2019, there was over 400,000 people on the voter rolls that were to be purged, and it was folks who were active voters.
Voter groups pointed out mistakes for elections officials, which kept thousands of active voters rightfully on the rolls.
That should have been a red flag to legislators and to public officials that, like, this process is wrong.
Voter groups say that collaboration made a big difference, but their work is under attack. This past summer, Ohio's Republican-led State House passed a provision in the budget bill that prohibits elections officials from, quote, collaborating with outside groups.
We see even the impact that voter rights groups and advocates did with the purge. That is an attack on our election system, and it criminalizes the act of collaboration for election officials, which is very, very scary.
Provisions viewed as restricting voting advocacy and easier ballot access have been fueled by unfounded claims pushed by former President Trump and others that the 2020 election was rigged.
2020 presidential election was by far the most corrupt election in the history of our country. There's never been anything like this.
McGhee says the country has a long history of voter suppression activities meant to preserve power, but at a cost to all.
I figured out through my journey was that the economic costs of a racially unequal system, of racism in our politics and our policymaking, are so hidden and yet so huge that ultimately it has a cost for us all, white people too.